To my family, I'm Piper, the quiet one, the odd one, the one with paint permanently smudged on her knuckles and a faraway look in her eyes. I'm the starving artist, a label they apply with a unique blend of pity and contempt, like a sticky name tag I can't peel off. It's their shorthand for my failure to launch, my refusal to slot into the neat, profitable world my father built. They see my tiny rent-controlled apartment, my second-hand clothes, my choice to spend my days wrestling with canvas and color instead of climbing a corporate ladder, and they shake their heads. They think they know my story, a sad, little tale of artistic delusion. They have no idea who I really am. To the rest of the world, or at least the parts of it that matter to me, I'm not Piper at all. I'm Nyx. Nyx is a ghost, a myth, an artist who emerges in the dead of night and leaves behind blistering beautiful truths on the forgotten walls of the city. Nyx's work doesn't hang in sterile galleries, it lives on brick and concrete, a raw, public heartbeat, and in a twist of irony so sharp it could draw blood. Nyx's work sells, not for enough to cover rent, but for millions. It's a secret I've guarded with my life, a fortune I've built in the shadows, while my family patronizingly offered to buy me groceries. My anonymity isn't a gimmick, it's a shield. It's the only thing that allows me to breathe, to create, to be the person I was meant to be, far from the crushing weight of their expectations. My father is Marcus Thorne. To the city, he's a titan of industry, a visionary real estate developer, the man who reshaped the skyline. His new flagship, the impossibly tall, soul-crushingly sterile glass needle, known as Thorne Tower, is set to be unveiled this afternoon. He calls it his legacy, a monument to his ambition. His name will be in every newspaper, his face on every local news channel, smiling that polished, predatory smile I know so well. He thinks it's his masterpiece. He doesn't know that I created mine on the side of his. Last night, while the city slept, I gave his legacy a little revision. Under the cold glow of the streetlights, with my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that was part terror, part exhilaration, I painted. As Nyx, I scaled the scaffolding and covered 50 feet of his pristine, imported marble with a mural. It's beautiful if I do say so myself. From a distance, it's a stunning, intricate portrait of a weeping willow, its branches flowing down the building like emerald tears. It's only when you get closer that you see the details. The faces of the elderly, etched with sorrow, hidden in the bark of the tree, the gnarled roots, shaped like desperate, grasping hands. And in the center, almost invisible unless you're looking for it, a subtle depiction of a briefcase full of cash, sliding from one hand to another, a ghost of a transaction that ruined dozens of lives. It's the story of the Westwood Apartments, the low-income housing block my father bulldozed to make way for this monument to his ego. It's the story of the bribery, the forged documents, and the broken people he left in his wake. A story he thinks he buried under a mountain of concrete and cash. He's about to find out that some things, like paint and truth, have a way of sticking around. The city is about to see his legacy in a whole new light, my light, and I'm standing here, in my paint-splattered jeans and worn-out hoodie, an invisible girl in the crowd, waiting for the show to begin. The hours before the unveiling were a special kind of hell. I was in my studio, which is really just a converted warehouse loft that smells permanently of turpentine and aerosol. The news was on, a low murmur of anticipation from the small television perched on a stack of books. They were showing aerial shots of Thorne Tower, a gleaming spear of hubris piercing the morning haze. The cameras were all focused on the front, on the massive crimson curtain hiding the entrance, and the dedication plaque. They hadn't seen my addition yet, not yet. My side of the building was still in shadow. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It was a feeling I knew well, the familiar dread of a family gathering, but magnified 1,000 times. My phone buzzed on the cluttered workbench. It was my mother, Eleanor. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A text this time. Piper, where are you? Your father's big day. You need to be here to support him. Wear the blue dress I bought you. The blue dress, a stiff, lifeless sheath of fabric she'd insisted on buying me 2 years ago, her annual attempt to scrub the artist off me and reveal the respectable daughter she was sure was hiding underneath. It was still in its box, a coffin for a version of me that never existed. I sank onto a rickety stool, the one with the green paint stain shaped like a question mark, and pressed my cold hands to my face. This whole thing, this grand, dangerous gesture, it wasn't just about justice for the Westwood tenants. That was the noble part. The part I told myself was the only reason. But if I was being honest, brutally honest in the unforgiving quiet of my own head, it was also about a lifetime of tiny cuts. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. My mind drifted back to a dinner, about a year ago. It was at my parents' house, a sterile mansion of white marble and glass that always felt more like a modern art museum than a home. My brother Leo, the golden child, was holding court. He'd just been made a junior vice president at Thorn Corp. He was 26. It's all about leveraging synergy, Dad. Leo had said, puffing out his chest in his perfectly tailored suit. We're streamlining the acquisitions pipeline. I managed to shave 0.3% off the top-line expenditure for the Q3 preliminary reports. My father, Marcus, had beamed at him, a rare, genuine smile that he never directed at me. That's my boy. That's the Thorn legacy, right there, building something real, something that lasts. He then turned his gaze to me, and the smile vanished, replaced by that familiar weary disappointment. Piper, you've been quiet, still playing with your paints. The condescension was so thick, I could have choked on it. I had a piece in the East Side Gallery show, Dad. I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. It sold on the opening night. He'd waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a fly. That's nice, honey. A little hobby to keep you busy. He turned back to Leo. Now this pipeline. I remember sitting there, my expensive, tasteless food growing cold on my plate, feeling utterly and completely invisible. My painting, a piece I had poured my soul into for weeks, a piece that a collector had paid $5,000 for, was a nice little hobby. Leo's corporate jargon salad was the family legacy. That night, I didn't just feel unseen, I felt erased. The anger was a slow, cold burn that started in my gut and spread through my veins. It was the kind of anger you can't shout about. It's the kind you have to paint. The catalyst for the mural, though, the thing that tipped me from quiet resentment into active rebellion, came a few months later. I was at my father's office, dropping off some tax documents he'd demanded I sign in person. His secretary was out, and he was on a conference call, so I waited in his cavernous office. He was a messy man, for someone so obsessed with polished appearances. Papers were scattered across his massive mahogany desk, and there it was, partially hidden under a prospectus for Thorn Tower, a file labeled Westwood Redevelopment, Final Disposition. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was his private business. But the name Westwood snagged in my memory. It was the place my father had boasted about acquiring for a steal. I opened the folder. It wasn't just filled with legal documents and architectural plans. Tucked in the back were photocopies of letters, not from lawyers, but from people. Handwritten pleas. A woman named Elena Rodriguez, writing about how she'd lived in her apartment for 45 years, how her late husband had planted the willow tree in the courtyard the year their son was born. A man named Samuel Jones, a retired veteran, begging for more time, his shaky handwriting a testament to his age and desperation. There were a dozen of them, each one a small, heartbreaking story of a life being uprooted for my father's bottom line. But the worst was a single sheet of paper, an internal memo from my father to his lawyer. It was a cold, calculated breakdown of the plan. It mentioned lowballing the relocation assistance and leveraging code violations, real or fabricated, to accelerate the eviction process. And then the kill shot. A line about a city councilman, a Mr. Henderson, and a political donation of $50,000 to his re-election campaign, made through a shell corporation, to ensure the zoning changes were pushed through without a public hearing. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just ruthless business. This was corruption. This was cruelty. He hadn't just bought a building. He'd destroyed a community. He'd paid to silence their voices. He'd looked at those people, at Elena and Samuel, and all the others, and decided they were worth less than his ambition. He'd taken their homes, their history, their dignity, and bulldozed it all to build a monument to himself. That's when the idea for the mural began to form. It was a seed of rage that started to sprout in the dark. He wanted a legacy. Fine, I would give him one. A legacy that told the whole story. My phone buzzed again, dragging me back to the present. This time it was Julian, my agent, my friend, my co-conspirator, the only person in the world who knew I was Nick's. I answered, my voice hoarse. You watching? He asked. No preamble. That was Julian. I'm trying not to, I said, pacing the length of my studio. The concrete floor was cold under my thin socks. The art world is already buzzing, he said, his voice a low calming hum. Anya Sharma is on site. I made sure she got the anonymous's tip about a potential new Nyx piece appearing downtown. She's practically salivating. Anya Sharma was the most influential art critic in the country. Her word could turn an unknown artist into a star overnight. For Nyx, she was a champion. Having her there was a critical piece of the plan. It would frame the narrative from the very beginning. This wasn't vandalism. It was a major artistic event. And the other package? I asked, my heart thudding. Delivered by courier to Sarah Jenkins at the Sentinel an hour ago. Signature required. She has it. Sarah Jenkins was an investigative reporter with a reputation for being a shark. She'd taken down a corrupt state senator last year. The package she now possessed contained copies of everything I'd found in my father's file, along with a detailed, anonymous letter, explaining the symbolism she would soon see on the side of Thorn Tower. The mural was the match. The documents were the gasoline. You're sure about this, Piper? Julian's voice softened. There's no going back from this. You know that, right? This isn't just poking the bear. This is setting the bear on fire and locking the cage. I stopped pacing and looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the studio window. I saw a pale, tired-looking woman with wide, anxious eyes, the starving artist. But behind that reflection, I saw the memory of Elena Rodriguez's handwriting, the cold dismissal in my father's eyes, the smug satisfaction on my brother's face, the lifetime of being told my passion was worthless. He bulldozed their homes. Julian, I said, my voice hardening, the last of the doubt burning away into cold, clear resolve. He built his shiny tower on top of their lives. He thinks he can just bury the truth under enough money and concrete. He's wrong. I took a deep breath. I'm sure. It's time they saw what a nice little hobby can do. The plan had to be more than just an act of artistic defiance. A splash of paint could be sandblasted away in a day, dismissed as common vandalism, a minor nuisance on my father's glorious path. I couldn't let that happen. The mural had to be a surgical strike, a work of art so significant and a story so compelling that it couldn't be ignored or erased. It had to become a permanent stain on his legacy. This required more than just spray cans and a steady hand. It required a strategy. It required foresight. For weeks leading up to the unveiling, I had lived a double, no, a triple life. By day, I was Piper, the quiet daughter, fielding calls from my mother about what shoes to wear to the gala. By night, I was Nyx, scouting the location, charting security patrol routes, sketching the mural down to the last detail in a locked hidden notebook. And in the hours between, I became a different person entirely, an anonymous strategist, a ghost in the machine, laying the groundwork for the storm that was to come. My first move was to weaponize the art world itself. As Nyx, I had built a reputation for being not just a talented artist, but a fiercely principled one. My work always had a message, always punched up, always spoke for the voiceless. This gave me an immense well of credibility to draw from. I knew that when the mural appeared, the establishment, my father's world, would immediately try to frame it as a criminal act. I had to preempt that. That's where Anya Sharma came in. I didn't just tip her off, I cultivated her. Through Julian, I had maintained an anonymous correspondence with her for years. She respected Nyx's mind as much as the art. 2 weeks before the unveiling, Julian, acting as my intermediary, sent her a cryptic message. Nyx is preparing a new major work. It will be a direct response to the gentrification and corporate overreach in the city. The canvas will be ambitious. We didn't say where or when, but we planted the seed. We made her feel like an insider. So when Julian's final tip-off came this morning, she wasn't just a reporter chasing a story. She was a participant in an event she was already invested in. She would be my first and most powerful line of defense, ready to tell the world, not that a building was defaced, but that a masterpiece was born. But art world credibility wasn't enough. I needed to control the other narrative. The one about my father. That's where the file I'd found became my hidden leverage. I spent a week in the dim light of a 24-hour copy shop, meticulously duplicating every single page. The letters from the tenants, the internal memos, the damning note about the bribe to Councilman Henderson. I felt a tremor in my hands as I handled them. The physical proof of my father's callousness. It felt like holding a snake.
This package of documents was my ace in the hole, but who to give it to? Sending it to a major newspaper was risky. A story like this could get buried by editors with friends in high places. Friends like my father. I needed a bulldog, someone with a personal stake in taking down powerful men. I spent days researching, digging into the archives of local journalism, and I found Sarah Jenkins. She was a senior reporter at the Sentinel, but she ran a small, independent blog on the side where she published the stories her own paper was too timid to touch. She had a reputation for being relentless and fiercely protective of her anonymous sources. She was perfect. I assembled the package with the care of a bomb maker, the copied documents, a burner phone with a single number in its contacts, Julian's, under a fake name and a typewritten letter. I wrote it in the persona of a disgruntled former employee of Thorn Corp, someone with a conscience who couldn't stay silent any longer. I detailed the story of the Westwood evictions. I pointed out the bribe, and then I gave her the key. On the day of the Thorn Tower unveiling, I wrote, "Look to the western face of the building. The artist known as Nix is about to tell this story to the entire city. The mural will be the proof of my claims. It will show you the faces of the people your city has forgotten." I was tying the art directly to the evidence, making them inextricable. The mural would provide the public outrage. The documents would provide the legal and journalistic teeth. My final piece of leverage was the one my family would never in a million years see coming. My own success. For years, I had lived like a pauper, not because I had to, but because it was the safest way to maintain my cover. Julian had expertly managed the Nix empire. He'd set up a series of shell corporations and offshore accounts, a dizzying maze of legal entities that made the money virtually untraceable back to Piper Thorne. The millions I'd earned from selling my pieces to wealthy anonymous collectors, ironically, men very much like my father, were sitting in a place so secure, so far from my family's world, that it might as well have been on the moon. I had a standing room only show in Berlin last year. A triptych I painted sold to a tech billionaire for $7 million. My family thought I was struggling to pay my electricity bill. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. This secret wealth was more than just a safety net. It was my ultimate power. It meant I didn't need them, not for their money, not for their approval, not for anything. It was the foundation of my freedom, a freedom they didn't even know I had. This was the part that felt like the most profound, if questionable, choice. I could have just leaked the documents. I could have anonymously sent the evidence to the district attorney and watched my father's empire crumble from a safe distance, but that felt incomplete. It felt like their narrative would still win. Marcus Thorne, the corrupt businessman, a story as old as time. It wouldn't touch the core of the wound. It wouldn't address the years of being told my passion, my art, my very essence, was a worthless hobby. No, it had to be the art. My worthless art had to be the weapon that brought down his priceless legacy. He needed to see his monument to greed defaced by the very thing he despised. He needed to be undone not by a lawsuit or an audit, but by a picture. It was a deeply personal, almost theatrical choice. It was a choice an artist would make. It wasn't clean or simple. It was messy and loud and full of feeling. It was a public reckoning born from 1,000 private humiliations. And as the time for the unveiling ticked closer, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was the only choice I could have ever made. I arrived at the plaza an hour before the ceremony. The city had pulled out all the stops. A string quartet was playing something bland and classical. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. It was a sea of expensive suits, glittering jewelry, and forced smiles. The world my father built, I in my worn jeans, faded black hoodie, and scuffed boots, was a smudge of grime on their perfect picture. I blended in perfectly, a nobody. I found a spot near the back, leaning against a cold concrete planter, and watched my family ascend the stage. There was my father, Marcus, waving to the crowd, his smile as wide and artificial as a department store mannequin's. He looked powerful, untouchable. Beside him was my mother, Eleanor, a vision in shimmering gold, her face a mask of practiced social grace. And then there was Leo. My brother looked like a prince who had just inherited his kingdom, his hair perfectly coiffed, his suit radiating smugness. He scanned the crowd, his eyes passing right over me without a flicker of recognition. To him I was just part of the scenery. My father stepped up to the podium, his voice amplified by the speakers. boomed across the plaza. Thank you all for coming to celebrate this momentous day. Today we don't just dedicate a building, we dedicate a vision of progress, of prosperity, of the bold future of this great city. A smattering of polite applause. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. Progress, prosperity. He said the words like they were holy, but I knew what they really meant. They meant bulldozers and eviction notices. They meant broken people and backroom deals. This tower, he continued, his arm sweeping up towards the sky, is more than just steel and glass. It is a legacy, a symbol of what we can achieve when we dare to dream big. Now, it was time. As he spoke, the sun, which had been hiding behind a cloud, finally broke through. Its rays climbed the side of the tower, moving across the smooth marble facade, until they hit my mural. It happened slowly at first, a murmur in the crowd, a few people pointing. A camera operator, bored with my father's speech, swung his lens to see what the commotion was about, and then the image of my mural, the weeping willow, 50 feet high, filled the massive jumbotron screens on either side of the stage. A collective gasp swept through the plaza. It was like a physical force, a wave of shock that rolled from the front rows to the back. My father, blinded by the stage lights, hadn't noticed yet. He was still smiling, still talking about the future. But Leo saw it. His confident smirk dissolved into a slack-jawed gape of disbelief. He grabbed my father's arm, pointing frantically at the screen. My father stopped mid-sentence. He turned. He looked at the screen, and for a full silent second, he didn't comprehend. He just saw a tree. Then he turned his head and looked at the actual building. I watched his face. I will never forget the sequence of emotions that played across it. First, confusion. Then a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. His face turned a blotchy, furious red, and then something else. A flicker of dawning, horrified recognition. I knew he was seeing it, not just the tree, but the faces in the bark, the ghostly image of the briefcase. He knew. What is that? He snarled into the microphone, his voice a raw, ugly sound that was a stark contrast to his earlier polished tone. Turn that off. Get that off the screen. But it was too late. The silent takeover was complete. The crowd was no longer looking at him. Every phone, every camera, every pair of eyes, was now fixed on the side of the building. My father's perfectly orchestrated ceremony had been hijacked. Security, he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic. Cover it up. Get some tarps. Get it covered now. Leo, ever the loyal soldier, started shouting at the event staff, his face contorted in a mask of impotent fury. Who did this? This is vandalism. This is a criminal act. We'll have you arrested. My mother looked like she was about to faint. Her hand was pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with social horror. This was her worst nightmare, a public scandal. The perfect facade of the Thorne family was cracking before the entire city. And then the second phase of my plan kicked in. A woman with a sharp, intelligent face and a press badge pushed her way to the front of the media scrum. Anya Sharma. It's a nix, she exclaimed, her voice ringing with genuine excitement. My God, it's a nix. Look at the detail, the social commentary. It's breathtaking. This isn't vandalism. This is a masterpiece. Her words, broadcast over the still live sound system, cut through the chaos. Other reporters started scribbling furiously, shouting her name, asking for her expert opinion. The narrative was shifting, right before my father's eyes. He was losing control. Then the final blow. Another reporter, a woman with a determined set to her jaw, stepped forward, holding her phone up like a weapon. Sarah Jenkins. Mr. Thorne, she called out, her voice sharp and clear. Sarah Jenkins, from the Sentinel. The mural seems to depict a weeping willow, the same kind of tree that was a beloved landmark at the Westwood Apartments. Is this mural a comment on the controversial eviction of those tenants? The silence that followed was deafening. My father froze, his face a ghastly shade of white. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The name Westwood hung in the air, a poisonous cloud. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The titan of industry was speechless, cornered. I stayed leaning against my planter, my hoodie pulled up, a ghost in the whirlwind. My heart was pounding, a wild drum of terror and triumph. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know the degenerate punk who had ruined him was his own daughter, standing 20 yards away. I hadn't said a word, but my art, My silent, worthless art was screaming his sins to the world, and everyone was finally listening. The hours that followed the disastrous unveiling were a blur of frantic energy. The family retreated, or rather fled, back to the penthouse at the top of Thorn Tower, a gilded cage, now overlooking the source of their public humiliation. I didn't go with them. I just melted back into the crowd and walked away, my phone buzzing incessantly in my pocket. I let it buzz. I walked for miles, just breathing the city air, feeling the cool autumn breeze on my face. For the first time in a long time, it felt like my own. When I finally got back to my studio, I turned on the TV. It was everywhere. My mural was on every channel. The image of the weeping willow was the backdrop for a fiery debate. On one side were the art critics, led by a triumphant Anya Sharma, who were calling it the most important piece of public art in a generation. They were deconstructing the symbolism, praising the technique, celebrating Nix's daring. On the other side were the political commentators, now armed with the details from Sarah Jenkins' explosive article, which had just gone live on the Sentinel's website. The headline was brutal: Thorn's Tower, Thorn's shame, leaked documents connect, developer to bribery, illegal evictions. The article featured quotes from the tenants, their heartbreaking stories, now given a voice. It mentioned Councilman Henderson by name. The story was no longer just about art, it was about a full-blown political and criminal scandal. Nix Thorn Tower was the #1 trending topic worldwide. My father's legacy wasn't a tower of glass and steel anymore. It was a monument to his corruption, and my painting was its plaque. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang with a number I knew by heart. My father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it ring. A text message from him appeared. "Pick up the phone, Piper, now." It was a command, not a request. The tone he used when he was used to being obeyed. I sat on my stool, looking at the blinking screen. The old Piper would have answered immediately, her stomach in knots, ready to absorb his anger, to be the quiet, sympathetic ear for his tirade. The old Piper was gone. My brother Leo tried next. His text was dripping with his signature arrogance, and a new frantic edge. "Where the hell are you? The family is in crisis, and you're off doing God knows what. Dad is going insane. You need to be here." A few minutes later, another one. "Of course you probably love this. This is right up your alley, isn't it? Some low-life vandal attacking people who actually build things. You probably think this art is brilliant." I almost laughed. "Oh Leo," I thought, "you have no idea." Finally my mother called. I knew she would. Her approach was always different. Not anger or commands, but the cloying sweetness of emotional manipulation. I decided to answer this one. "Big Piper, thank God," she said, her voice tight with strained civility. "I've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level, neutral. "Fine? How can you be fine? Don't you see what's happening? Your father, this is destroying him. The investors are calling. The mayor's office. It's a nightmare. The things that reporter, that horrible woman, is writing." Her voice started to crack. "We need to be a family right now. We need to present a united front. Your father needs his family around him." There it was, the classic Eleanor guilt trip. "Your father needs you." It had been the refrain of my entire life. Your father needs you to be quiet. Your father needs you to be presentable. Your father needs you to be quiet. Your father needs you to be presentable. It was a simple sentence, just 5 words, but it was a declaration of war. It was a boundary, a wall I had never dared to build before. "What?" she finally stammered. "What do you mean? You're not coming over?" "Piper, this is not the time for your moods. Your family is under attack." "I'm busy," I said, the words feeling strange and powerful in my mouth. It was a lie, of course. I was sitting in a dusty studio, doing nothing, but it was also the truest thing I had ever said to her. I was busy. I was busy dismantling the toxic structure that had defined my entire existence. I was busy becoming myself. Busy? Busy doing what? Your little paintings. The condescension was back, laced with desperation. "Piper, I am not asking you. I am telling you. You will get in a cab and you will come to this apartment right now." I took a breath. I looked around my studio, at the canvases leaning against the walls, the glorious chaotic mess of my life's work. My work, not a hobby, not a phase. My life. "No," I said, and the word was as solid as a locked door. I won't. And I hung up. I stared at my phone, my hand trembling slightly. It was a small act, hanging up on my mother, but it felt monumental. It was the first tremor of a power shift that had been building inside me for years. They had always had the power of money, of approval, of familial obligation. But their power was built on a foundation of lies and secrets. My power was built on the truth, and on a few $1 million they knew nothing about. The ground was shifting under their feet, and they hadn't even realized it yet, but they would. Oh, they would. A day later, the summons came. It wasn't a request, it was a demand, delivered via a series of increasingly frantic texts from Leo, each one more accusatory than the last. The scandal had metastasized. The district attorney's office had officially launched an investigation into the Thorne Corporation and Councilman Henderson, who had already been suspended pending the outcome. Major investors were not just calling, they were pulling out, invoking morality clauses in their contracts. The Thorne empire was crumbling, and it was happening live on every news channel. Dad demands a family meeting. At the house. Tonight, 7 p.m. Don't you dare be late. I texted back a simple, okay. This was it. The confrontation. I spent the afternoon preparing. I took a long shower, washing away the last of the studio dust and the lingering scent of spray paint. I didn't put on the blue dress my mother had bought me. Instead, I chose my own armor, a pair of well-fitting black trousers, a simple silk blouse, and a black blazer. It was understated, professional, the clothes of a woman who knew her own mind. Then I called Julian. I'm going in, I said. You want backup? He asked. I want you there as my legal representative, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. Bring the portfolio. The portfolio, he said, a note of deep satisfaction in his voice. It's about damn time. See you at 7. I arrived at my parents' mansion at exactly 7 p.m. The house, usually so imposing and pristine, felt different. It felt haunted. The air was thick with a tense, brittle energy. I walked into the cavernous living room, where they were all waiting. My father was pacing in front of the cold, black marble fireplace, his face haggard, a deep purple rage simmering in his eyes. My mother was perched on the edge of a white sofa, clutching a silk pillow like a life raft. Leo stood by the bar, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey, his movements jerky and aggressive. They all turned as I entered. For a moment they just stared, a flicker of confusion in their eyes. They were expecting the disheveled, apologetic Piper. They weren't prepared for the woman who walked in. You're late, my father growled, though I wasn't. I'm on time, I said calmly, taking a seat in an armchair opposite my mother, creating a space for myself. Don't play games with me, Piper, he roared, his voice echoing in the huge room. Do you have any idea what you've done? It was a strange question. He couldn't possibly know, or could he? I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, my voice steady. This attitude, he spat, gesturing wildly. This detachment. Your family is being torn apart. Our name is being dragged through the mud by some degenerate with a spray can. And you're busy. You swan in here like you're a guest at a hotel. Where is your loyalty? Leo chimed in, his voice slurring slightly from the whiskey. We needed you. We needed your support. But you don't care, do you? You never have. Always off in your own little fantasy world, looking down on us. Looking down on you, I asked, a genuine note of disbelief in my voice. Leo, you've never seen me at all. Just then, the doorbell rang, a moment of confusion. They weren't expecting anyone else. The housekeeper let Julian in. He walked in, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He gave me a subtle nod and stood beside my chair. Who the hell is this? Leo demanded. This is Julian Croft, I said. He's my business manager and legal counsel. My father let out a short, incredulous bark of a laugh. Your business manager? What business? Your Etsy store. I ignored him. Julian, I believe you have something for my father. Julian stepped forward and placed his briefcase on the glass coffee table. He opened it and took out a single thick portfolio. He slid it across the table towards my father. Mr. Thorne, he said, his voice calm and professional, my client, the artist known as Nix, has received a significant offer for the mural on your tower. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush, white carpet. My father stared at the portfolio, as if it were a venomous snake. Leo's jaw hung open. My mother just looked back and forth between us, utterly lost. Slowly, my father reached out and opened the portfolio. Inside was a formal, legally binding offer from a consortium of the world's most prestigious modern art museums. They were offering to purchase the mural, or rather the section of the building it was on. The offer was for $15 million. My father's face went white. He looked from the paper to me, and then back to the paper. Nix, he whispered, the name tasting like poison in his mouth. This is insane. This is a joke. I assure you, it's no joke, Julian said smoothly. Nix is my client. The offer is real. In fact, it's probably low. We expect it to go higher once the private collectors get involved. $15 million. For the vandalism that was destroying him. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. He was being offered a lifeline, a way to recoup some of his catastrophic losses, from the very source of his ruin. There is, however, a condition, Julian continued, his voice cutting through the silence, a non-negotiable part of any sale. Nix's contracts are very specific on this point. 50% of the gross sale price must be donated to a charity of the artist's choosing. My father looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. What charity? Julian met my gaze. I gave him a slight nod. A newly established trust fund, Julian said, set up to provide financial and housing assistance to the former tenants of the Westwood apartments. And there it was, the final perfect checkmate. The blood drained from my father's face. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a dawning soul-shattering understanding. He looked at the portfolio. He looked at Julian, and then his eyes, wide with horror, settled on me. He saw it all in that one awful moment. My hobby, my fantasy world, my absence, my calm. It all clicked into place. You, he whispered, the word barely audible. It was not a question, it was an indictment. I didn't flinch, I just met his gaze. You told me my art was worthless, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying across the silent room. You said I should be building something real, something that lasts. I gestured vaguely towards the window, towards the city where his tower stood, now forever marked by my hand. Well, I did. I built a legacy, Dad. Not out of steel and glass, but out of truth. And it turns out, it's worth quite a lot. I stood up. The mural isn't for sale, by the way. Not to you, not to anyone. It was never about the money. It's a gift. My gift to the city, a permanent reminder of what you did, so that no one ever forgets. I looked at my mother, whose face was a crumpled mask of tears, and at Leo, who just stared at me, as if he'd never seen me before. In a way he hadn't. None of them had. I'm leaving now, I said, and I turned my back on them, and walked out of the house that had never been my home, leaving them alone, with the beautiful, terrible, priceless truth. In the end, my father's empire fell just as he had built it, quickly, ruthlessly, and with no regard for the people in its path. The mural became a symbol of a city's reclamation of its own story. It was preserved, protected by a legion of art lovers and activists, who made it politically impossible to remove. Tourists now flocked to see it, this massive, beautiful scar on the face of corporate greed. Thorn Tower is no longer my father's legacy, it's Nix's. His name is forever tied not to the building, but to the art that exposed him. He lost everything. The company went into receivership, his assets were frozen, and the legal battles consumed what was left of his fortune and his reputation. Last I heard, he and my mother sold the mansion and are living in a much smaller condo, their social circle having evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Leo didn't fare much better. Without the family name and money to prop him up, he was just another arrogant, mediocre man, with an inflated sense of self-worth. He couldn't hold down a job. His synergy and pipelines meant nothing in the real world. He tried to reach out to me once, a long rambling email that was equal parts accusation and pathetic plea for a handout. I never replied, and I'm free. I am finally Holy Piper, and I am Nyx. The two halves of myself are no longer at war. They've merged. I still live in my studio, though it's a bit bigger now, with better light. I bought the whole warehouse. I established the Westwood Tenants Fund myself, seeding it with an initial donation of $5 million. It's managed by a proper board, helping families who have been displaced by developers, just like my father. Julian still manages my work, and our friendship is the most solid thing in my life. I still paint on the street sometimes, under the cloak of darkness, because that's where my heart is. But I also have gallery shows now, under my own name, Piper Thorne. I decided not to hide anymore. My name doesn't belong to my father's failed legacy, it belongs to me. For a long time, I told myself that what I did wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about giving a voice to the voiceless. And that was true. But as I stand here now, looking out over the city skyline from my studio window, I have to be honest with myself, and with you. There was a part of it, a deep and undeniable part, that was for the girl who was told her passion was a worthless hobby. It was for the daughter who was never seen. It wasn't about revenge, until it was, because sometimes, the only way to get justice for others, is to first claim your own. You have to be willing to burn down the box they put you in, not just to save yourself, but to light the way for others. My family saw my art as a weakness, a diversion from a real life. They never understood that it was my greatest strength. They looked at me, but they only ever saw what they wanted to see, the starving artist. In the end, I made them see me for who I truly am, and it cost them everything. What do you think? Did I go too far, or was it the only way to make them finally see the truth? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Every family has its secrets and its unspoken rules, and sometimes standing up for yourself can feel like a revolution. If you have a story about a time you had to fight to be seen for who you really are, I hope you'll share it. Your stories matter. Thank you for listening to mine, and if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. It really does help the channel. I'll see you next time.